Previously on Bush War.
In the early 60s, it is now many people started asking questions as to why are we still pursuing passive politics when the system is brutalizing us?
I think the total of the training camp we established that it was 5. When the time I got to the Ngurubashe, I was already training in 92 soldiers.
Ek kan onthou dat ons vreeslik koud geslaap het. Daar was geen geriewe nie en ons moes maar in slaapsakke so tussen die bosse slaap. En ons is maar softies, ons nie gewoond aan so slaap nie.
In August 1966, at Onkulumbash, just south of the Angolan border, South African security forces clashed with SWAPO fighters for the first time. The next day, Die Burger reported that everything was under control after the attack in Ovambo land. SWAPO headquarters, on the other hand, declared that they had no choice but to turn to armed struggle. And statistics from 1966 to 74 paint a vivid picture. SWAPO fighters, then simply known as terrorists in South Africa, attempted to cross the border in ever bigger numbers. With P.W. Botha as Minister of Defence, the South African government had to find a military solution for securing the border. In 1974, legislation was passed transferring responsibility for border protection from the police to the Defence Force.
Toe ek groot geword en op skool was, het ons geglo daar is 'n gevaar in Angola wat die Russe op daai stadium en die Kubane was en as ook SWAPO wat geondersteun is deur hulle. Dit was die Koue Oorlog tussen Amerika en Rusland en ons het gevoel is absoluut die regte ding om te doen om ons land te beskerm teen die kommunisme. Ek dink dit laat 'n mens saam staan as jy weet daar's 'n vyand, 'n visuele vyand waarteen jy moet veg. So dit was 'n goeie gevoel geweest in daai opsig. Of daar was mense gewees of wat oor see gegaan het om weermag vry te spring. En vir die meeste van die mense was dit in 'n opsig 'n verkeerde ding. Ons het gevoel dat hulle moet ook help om die land te beskerm.
In Namibia, a shared conviction was also taking root.
You know what motivated the people? The 1960 independences, the independences of Ghana, the independence, I think also of Congo.
Charles Namolo's father often talked to him about this.
1959 or so, when I was 9 years, he has been telling me, you know, we were listening to the radio, he had always a radio.
Good evening, comrades and fellow compatriots. You are now tuned to Radio Freedom, the voice of the African National Congress.
He was tuning it to Congo and he told me, you see, these people are singing happily because they are free.
From within white South Africa, the picture looked completely different.
Hierdie konsep wat oor eeue geduur het, Portugal regeer Mosambiek, Angola. Suid-Afrika regeer Suidwes-Afrika. Brittanje regeer Botswana, nou later Botswana, Basutoland, Lesotho, Swaziland, het Swaziland gebly, Nyasaland, Malawi, Tanganyika, Noord-Rhodesia. Die hele suide was dis Portugees-Brits, Suid-Afrika. En dit was 'n magsposisie, dit was 'n regeringsposisie, 'n gesagsposisie wat 'n paar eeue geduur het, wat 'n lang ruk geduur het. En mense het begin dink, dit sal vir altyd so bestaan, maar dit het nie. Die vrees was, ek onthou soos gister, hoe dit in die Nasionale Party Caucus gewaarsku is en gesê is, julle moet Pik Botha keer hy onderhandel met hierdie klomp blikskorrels, en net nou is hulle oor die konene en dan moet ons veg op die Oranje rivier.
In the context of the time, few conscripts questioned the necessity of military training and service.
Toe ons weermag opgeroep is vir weermag, toe was daar nie 'n kwessie van is dit reg of verkeerd nie. Vir ons was dit reg geweest. Ons was nie betrokke by al die politiek en wat agter die skerms plaasvind nie. As ek vandag daaraan terugdink, ek sou miskien vir die generaals wou gevra het, hoeveel goed is daar waarvan ons nie geweet het nie, jy weet. Was dit net 'n kwessie gewees om soos ek sê, die rooi gevaar uit ons land uit te hou, of het dit gegaan oor olie in Angola, of het dit gegaan oor enige iets waarvan ons nie geweet het nie, jy weet.
Domestic opposition against apartheid was growing, but the majority of white South Africans still supported the National Party government.
Ek is soms net hartseer dat daar 'n persepsie bestaan dat daar was 'n kabinet en 'n regering wat al die goed aangevang is wat ons gedoen het. Dit is nie waar nie. Dit is nie waar nie. Daar was elke jaar 'n kongres van elke provinsie waar elkeen in daardie provinsie, al die takke, het bijeengekom vanaf in Transvaal, vanaf Messina, regdeur tot Nelspruit, regdeur tot Christiane, kom dan tesame. En daar staan hulle op, elke kiesafdeling. En hulle druk die regering, hulle sê die regering is nie sterk genoeg nie, die regering is nie kras genoeg nie. Hulle wil aandklok reëls teen die swartes ingestel hê. Hulle wil sterker maatreëls hê, en dit word gesteun.
In the election of November 1977, the National Party received almost 2/3 of the votes. The UN General Assembly, on the other hand, had declared in December 1973 that SWAPO was the sole authentic representative of the Namibian people. South Africa hit back, even though few delegates remained in their seats to hear it.
And I must reiterate here that our will and determination to defend and safeguard by every means at our disposal that which is ours is absolute.
From the other side, the rhetoric was equally fiery.
We shall not submit. We shall hit back by all means in our power.
Namibia was still under South African control. Apartheid was in force there too. That motivated many SWAPO supporters to cross the border.
There were a lot of demonstration against the system, and because of the repressive nature of the system, we thought, the time has come now to go and join our elders, Tate Nangodu, our political mobilizers at that time, because they were speaking to us through Radio Tanzania. And then I decided this is the right time now, I must cross over.
The SADF and SWAPO both prepared for military escalation, each according to its own convictions and in its own way. In South Africa, a draft system was instituted as early as 1956, whereby white men could be drafted for 9 months of military service. In 1967, the government scrapped the draft because it was seen as unfair. From the 1st of January 1968, all white men between 18 and 55 had to do military service, at first for 9 months, then for 12 months, and still later for 2 years, with follow-up camps or tours of duty. Refusing to do military service meant 6 years in jail. Plan, SWAPO's armed wing, was recruiting volunteers in ever bigger numbers for training and deployment aimed at throwing off the South African yoke and achieving independence. Their strongest support came from Ovambo land. SWAPO fighters were trained in the Soviet Union, Cuba, Egypt, and several countries in the then Eastern Bloc. Charles Nielo crossed the Namibian border and waited at a transit camp in Tanzania to be told where he would go for training.
Possibly second week of September, we were selected, and now we were hearing we were going to go to the Soviet Union. Whoa, Soviet Union, we were excited, and then to go to the Soviet Union, we have to go by plane. Oh, plane!
The first flight of their lives took them up the eastern coast of Africa via Yemen to Russia.
10 of us will go to Moscow. The rest will go to the Crimea. So first we had to fly to the Crimea and drop the 58, where they were going to be trained in various disciplines. So because we had groups divided in artillery, the engineers, that's the sappers, the anti-aircraft, and then the medics also, the medics.
I don't have the total figure, but definitely many hundreds of them were trained here in different military colleges, you see, including the top commanders of the armed forces.
Charles Nielo and his colleagues 10 young men from rural Namibia were taken to the house in Moscow where they would be staying and offered a meal unlike anything they had ever seen.
On my right, there were about 3 knives, 3 forks on the left, and then another knife, another fork, and also on my right, a spoon and another small spoon, and a lot of food on the table. None of us would start to eat because we did not know where to start. So we were looking at each other, just quiet.
They followed every movement of their Russian host.
What he took that evening for his dinner is what we took also. What he did not touch, we did not also touch, because we don't know when to touch this.
New table manners were only the beginning. Over the following days, they were medically examined and they had to get clothes for the Russian winter. Finally, the first real training.
What motivated us? We have to go back, we must be free, we must liberate ourselves. And that whether there was snow, the snow was nothing to us. Snow it was better. We felt also that we have to train hard in order for us to fight easy on the battlefield.
Gennady Dunaev was among the Russian instructors.
I should say that I enjoyed the time when I stayed with Namibians. Discipline was immense, I should say. Besides that, they are very easy to understand. They are very to repeat what you show, what you tell them to do. It was a great time for me.
They were very patient, because the discipline was there, because we were now being prepared as future leaders, as future commanders.
I would say that these are the people on whom you may rely. I'm talking militarily, since I was in military field. You can rely on Namibians, totally.
As the liberation movements grew, the South African government needed ever more soldiers to withstand the threat.
Die dienspligtydperk is verleng omdat ons meer troepe nodig gehad het, maar veral omdat ons meer ervare troepe nodig gehad het. Ons moes konvensioneel voorberei, maar ons moes ook verteeninsurgensie voorberei.
Mense beweeg om die brand op platform 2.
Every white man who turned 18 was called up, the start of 2 years of military service.
Jy het mos basies wat jy deur 'n baie harde tyd gaan waar jy alles geleer word van hoe om 'n geweer skoon te maak tot wie die kommunis is en tweede jaar is dan wanneer jy ouer 'n korporaal of 'n luitenant word of whatever en dan gee jy weer opleiding aan die volgende inname.
Basic training meant marching, rifle drill, shooting and fitness. This period of 3 months is burned into the memory of every soldier. After basics, everyone was assigned to a specific division, like infantry, artillery, engineers or armour. The Navy, Air Force and medical services were other possibilities. Within that environment, you could specialize further, become a gunner or a radio operator, a so-called tiffy or a chef. Wherever you found yourself, you would probably do at least one stint of 3 months at the border in the course of your military service. After 2 years' conscription, the troops were absorbed into the citizen force with the obligation to do a number of camps. As the war increased in intensity, these changed from 3-week refresher courses to 3 months duty on the border. Employers in South Africa were legally obliged to grant leave for this purpose. The law did not stipulate that it had to be paid leave, but even so, many employers paid a portion or the full salary for the period. The whole country, including the business sector, was thus drawn into the war effort. On the other side of the dividing line, SWAPO training was also continuing apace. Plan helped volunteers to slip across the border. Leaders brought home training received in Russia and other places, sharing it with new recruits in transit camps in countries like Tanzania.
I think, to an extent, we became strategists for our own, because there is nothing you can do. There's nothing you can do if you do not work to be able to succeed, and nobody will do it for you. I think by the grace of God, possibly some of us were given those talents to be able to plan and to execute those plans to be able to be effective.
According to SWAPO, permanent plan bases were set up in Ovambo. The SADF maintains that not a single base was established. Part of the SADF strategy was recruiting members among black and coloured Namibians. This was the beginning of a Hearts and Minds campaign which would divide the population of northern Namibia ever more sharply and set brother against brother.
The Hearts and Minds they employed, I think they also realized that them only, they would not win this war. They tried now to recruit the indigenous people to localize the war, so that the war was being Namibiaized, if I can say that, so that it's a Namibian fighting another Namibian, so that they will think that the Namibians were fighting each other and not the South Africans. I think it has been a trend wherever you had people who occupied the other peoples, they always employ those tactics. It happened in Vietnam. The Vietnamization of the war in Vietnam, Vietnamese against the Vietnamese being used by the Americans. This is what they did in Zimbabwe, this is what they did in Angola, and this is what they did in Namibia. The South Africans tried to recruit more Namibians, to fight against other Namibians.
Karl Njoba, son of assassinated Ovambo leader Pastor Cornelius Njoba, joined the SADF. Looking back, he says he was not fighting against his Ovambo brothers.
Ons het regtig geglo dat daar was 'n aanslag op hierdie gedeelte van die wêreld, Suid-Afrika ingesluit, Namibië ingesluit, wat hulle genoem het 'n totale aanslag. En ek dink daai factor het ons blind gemaakt om die precieze prentjie te zien waarvoor SWAPO eintlik veg. Ons het er eintlik misgekyk, hulle doelwitte. En ek dink die middel van die propaganda was doelwitte dan maar so oor toegemaak, dat mense dit is sin gemaak. Wat jy gesien het is die totale aanslag wat gemaakt is op Namibië en eventually Zuid-Afrika. So dit het een andere dimensie in die gevecht ingebracht en in die opvatting van die wat ons doen.
General Jannie Geldenhuys believes there was one key reason for the relative success of the SADF in controlling attacks inside Namibia.
Dit is eerstens omdat die binnelandse operasies baie suksesvol was. En tweedens, omdat ons nie teruggesit en gewag het dat dinge eers gebeur nie. Dat hulle kom oor die grens, ons aanval. Daar is 23 hoofmanne vermoor. Dit tel teen ons, dat dit kon gebeur het. Ons moes dit verhoed het.
Traditional leaders were directly in the line of fire. The main traitors, from SWAPO's point of view, were the Herero chiefs Clemens Kapoor and Kwamina Ruruaku, and the Ovambo leader Cornelius Njoba. They were seen as lackeys of the South African regime, and therefore legitimate targets.
SWAPO het die gedagte van een bevolking van die Hereros en een bevolking van die Oos-Kiprianen en een bevolking van Ovambo enzovoorts te probeer doodsmoor ten einde te werk in 'n nuwe een man een stem unitaire stelsel vir Suid-Afrika. Die moord op Clemens Kapoor was 'n doelbewuste poging van SWAPO om een van die groot mededingers vir die toekomstige leierskap in Suid-Afrika te elimineer. En dit is nie op 'n militêre basis doen nie, hy is eenvoudig op 'n sluipmoordaanval is Kapoor doodgemaak.
It was a low-intensity war playing out day after day along the border.
Nou, die binnenlandse operaties het aaneenlopend plaasgevind. 24 uur, elke dag, van elke week, van elke maand, van elke jaar in daai tydperk. En dit is die een aspek van die operaties, die minder skouspelagtige een, wat waarskynlik baie moontlik die grootste enkele bydrae gelewer het uiteindelik tot die eindresultaat.
And it was ordinary soldiers like Tashes and his mates who did the patrolling, hour after hour, week after week. This became part of the memories of a whole generation of white South African men.
Aan die einde van jou eerste jaar dan sal jy jou eerste grenspatrollies gaan loop waar jy op gaan grens toe en dan basies alles prakties doen wat jy geleer het.
Kyk, hierdie soort van oorlog het sy hoogtepunte, sy opwinding, sy aksie. Maar hierdie oorlog is eintlik 'n uitmergelende oorlog. Van kilometers en kilometers in die wit sand van Ovambo land loop. Van dominering van 'n gebied om te keer dat jou vyand die gebied domineer. En om dit te kan doen, verg dit, soos ek in die vorige inleiding gesê het, nie generaals en oorlogskabinette nie. Dit verg korporaals en luitenante, wat op die laagste vlak die mense kan inspireer om dit te kan doen. En dit is nie maklik nie. Ons het hier te doen gehad met 'n nuwe vorm van oorlogvoering wat dit is nie meer 'n stryd of 'n beslechting van 'n stryd wat gegaan het om groot militêre mag wat die een die ander militêr verslaan en die verslaande persoon dan die kondisies en voorwaardes van die veroweraar sou aanvaar nie.
You hit where the enemy does not expect you to hit them. You have also always the advantage of knowing the enemy and not the enemy knowing you, where you are, because you are like, you have no permanent structures. You move from one place to another. When they expect you to be there, you will be there. When you see, this is what is fascinating in guerrilla warfare, so that they do not know where you are operating from.
Next up on Bush War, the South African Defence Force develops its own guerrilla techniques, special forces for special tasks.